The solar return chart. This is a predictive tool in my astrology predictive toolkit that I've been using since I started my career as an astrologer, since I've started to study astrology. And I find it to be a very interesting addition to look at. I call it the cherry on top of my predictive ice cream sundae. That's what I call it. I look at someone's solar return chart routinely at the end of every consultation after I have already thoroughly assessed the upcoming transits, secondary progressions, and solar arc directions, because invariably that solar return chart is going to corroborate the greater themes that are coming up in the predictive analysis that I get from transits, secondary progressions, and solar arc directions. It always complements. It never goes off on a tangent or tells a different storyline. It's a really fascinating tool to understand. Well, in this video, I want to talk to you about this concept of where you should be predicting a solar return chart, where you should be casting a solar return chart. Should you cast the solar return chart from your current location or from your birth location? And in recent years, this lively debate has started to come up again in the astrological community, causing a lot of confusion for astrology students. And I'm going to demystify that for you in this video. We're going to talk about that. I'll give you my perspective, my views, and tell you what I do in my practice. But first, hello, a big warm welcome. Welcome back if you are back to my channel. I appreciate you so much. For those of you who are new here, my name is Maria DeSimone. I am a professional astrologer. You can find out more about me and my work over at insightfulastrology.com, where I have an entire astrology school offering classes that take you from beginner's level all the way through advanced. And I also offer personal consultations and astrology coaching packages. Very soon, your 2025 special year ahead video forecasts are going to be available on my website as well. Look for that starting in October. So right now, once a year, I teach a webinar on the solar return chart, and I want to invite you to register for this webinar if you are someone who already understands how to analyze a horoscope, if you understand how to read aspects in a birth chart, and you're considering taking the next step, taking the leap into predictive astrology. Studying the solar return chart is a really good segue. It is a really good segue because it allows you to strengthen your skills in aspect analysis, and it also introduces you to a tool that you can use in predictive astrology at the same time. And that is why I recommend learning about the solar return chart and working with it before you get into transits, progressions, solar arcs, all of the rest. And so registration is currently open for my solar return webinar, which will happen on Sunday, October 6th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. This webinar is recorded, so if you cannot attend live, don't worry, you'll receive the recording. And everyone who registers will get a copy of their birth chart, a copy of their most recent or soon to come solar return chart, whatever is closest in your particular birth data, and also my handy dandy solar return predictive checklist. In this webinar, we are going to use a random selection of your birth charts to bring the astrology to life as I explain my techniques for working with the solar return chart and how to implement them. I'm also going to offer a couple of examples from past client files so that you can see how the solar return works in action. This is a very personalized, fun class. I like to offer it live at least once a year so that you can have the interaction, so that we can have the live discussion. But of course, if you cannot attend live, like I said, don't worry, you'll get the recording. And I hope you decide to register. Go and claim your spot now. Registration will end on October 1st, and you can go to insightfulastrology.com if you would like to get your spot to this webinar. It's going to be a lot of fun. So in this video, I am not going to go into all of the methods and techniques that I use in analyzing solar returns. Obviously, that's what the webinar is for. But I wanted to address something that really frustrates and confuses astrology students and even professional astrologers to some extent. And that is the decision that you need to make when you are casting a solar return chart between casting it for the birth location or the current location. Some astrologers even advise traveling to another place to mitigate some of the maybe more difficult energies that are showing up in their solar return chart were they to stay in their current location. So I'm going to share my thoughts now on all of this. Now, when I first started learning astrology, I learned modern psychological astrology. I learned on the Placidus house system, and a quadrant house system was the most popular house system, and it is what was routinely taught when you learned astrology 20, 30 years ago, okay? It is recently, within the past maybe 8 to 10 years, that there has been a resurgence of popularity of Hellenistic, ancient, medieval techniques. Even though there have always been astrologers practicing these techniques, the texts that have been translated and made widely available now in recent years have made Hellenistic and medieval and Renaissance techniques more available and more popular. So a lot of astrology students now are learning astrology on the whole sign house system instead of a quadrant house system. And they are also learning more about ancient techniques. And neither one is right, neither one is wrong. So this video is going to remind you that you don't have to make someone else's system wrong in order for you to be right. That's not what any of us should be doing at all, because it is not a case of either or. It is a case of this and that. It is both. And when properly applied, both techniques will work, meaning whether you cast a solar return chart from your birth location or your current location, it's going to work. And I want to explain why. So modern astrologers started to cast the solar return for the current location, because back in ancient times, people didn't move around much anyway. You really couldn't. Relocating and traveling was actually a dangerous proposition. So the birth location was what was used, period, end of story. And there is a good argument for that, because the birth location, the birth chart, the energy imprints onto your soul as your soul enters your body in your birth chart. And so, of course, the solar return, which is the chart that is cast every year when the sun in the sky returns to the exact degree and minute that it was at your birth, that will set up a temporary theme chart where over the next year you can look at that chart, read it as a standalone chart, superimpose it against your birth chart, and get all sorts of interesting nuggets of information about what themes are coming up for you over the next year. The birth location will always work because that is the root of the chart. And we are using the solar return. So this is the sun's energies, and it is just the root of the chart. It's always going to work no matter what. But your current location has substance as well, because there's this saying, no matter where you go, there you are. Let that sink in and think of it at an energetic level. No matter where you go, there you are. And so if you cast a chart like the solar return chart, or any planetary return for that matter, in your current location, in the location where you are at the time that you have that particular return, the energetic imprint and vibration is still going to work. Why? Because from the moment that you are born, it is you, your cosmic DNA within you that is alive, and that energetic imprint is connected to your physical body, no matter where your physical body goes. So yes, the root of it is when you were born, and that's the beginning, and that's always going to work and be active. But if you're going into another location physically, you're taking that cosmic DNA and energetic imprint with you. That cosmic DNA doesn't stay in your birth location because you are no longer there. So you're taking it with you, and that's going to work as well. And some astrologers are proponents of relocating or traveling for the solar return. I personally don't advise that. Again, not because it doesn't work. I think it can work, but my position on that is, again, no matter where you go, there you are, and you're not going to erase the bigger cycles that are happening, like the transits, secondary progressions, or solar arc directions. Those are not going to change just because you are temporarily visiting another part of the world during your solar return. So you're not going to change those energies. And there is a limit to how much you can mitigate certain energies. So I personally wouldn't bother with traveling for a solar return, but I see the value in my practice, and I have tested this. You can correctly read a solar return chart when it is cast for the birth location and when it is cast for the current location. In my practice, I typically use the current location, but I have also experimented with the birth location, especially when clients are born in one part of the world and they live somewhere else. So let's say you're born in Nebraska in the United States, and then you move to Paris. Well, your solar return chart while you're in Paris is going to be very different mathematically than if you had cast it for Nebraska. So it is very interesting to keep casting it for Nebraska, where you were born, and then looking at it, excuse me, also with the one in Paris to see the differences. But what you're going to find is that one of them isn't right and one of them isn't wrong. They are both correct. They are both emphasizing different themes, different energies that are going to be seen in your bigger cycles, the transits, the progressions, and the solar arcs. So one is not right, one is not wrong. They're just going to give you a different vantage point. It's like when you look out the window, and if you're looking straight, you're going to have one vantage point. If you turn your head to the left, you will have another vantage point. If you turn your head to the right, you have another vantage point, but you're still looking out the window, and the sun's rays, the sun's vibrations are still coming on to you regardless. I hope this makes sense to you guys. So if you have a strong preference, then stick with it. That's the thing. That's where I want astrology students to kind of pick a path and choose either the birth location or the current location and work with that for a year, for 2 years. And, don't flip-flop if you're a new student, because flip-flopping will only confuse you. Once you're an advanced student or a more advanced astrologer, then go ahead, and if there's a big variety in the location from birth to where you are now, cast for both, and you'll be able to see how they both make sense retrospectively. That's a great thing to do with solar return charts. You cast them from the past. Pick a year in your life where something major happened and cast the solar return for both your current location and your birth location, or the location that you were at the time of that solar return, and compare them. And once you are proficient enough at reading and understanding how to implement the techniques of the solar return chart, you're going to see that they both work and they're both really fascinating. So pick one, work with it. It is the same thing as picking one house system and working with it and thoroughly understanding how to use it before you experiment with another house system. Same thing, guys. It is not either or. It's this and that. Two things can be correct at the same time. And that is so much of what enriches astrology, even though it can confuse and divide the astrological community when people get so vehement about defending their particular belief or position, with the nuances in using techniques that are not as hard and fast, because so much has changed since ancient times. Like, for example, we are no longer limited to our birth location. It is very easy to get on a plane and go anywhere in the world. And 3,000 years ago, it was not. 2,000 years ago, it was not. 1,000 years ago, it was not. Do you see what I'm saying, guys? Now, another thing I will say is I am a big fan of being true to the technique that you are using. So everything that I just told you really stands for modern astrology and modern techniques. So if you are looking at the solar return in a modern lens, then go ahead and do what I said. If you are looking at a medieval or a traditional solar return chart and implementing those specific techniques, then you're going to want to use the birth location and you're going to want to use the whole sign house system, because you want to make sure that you are correctly using the techniques. You're being true to the system. You're being true to the tradition. And if you start coagulating too many, ancient with modern and this and that, a sprinkle of this, you're just going to dilute your astrology. So I am a very big proponent of understanding why you're using the technique that you're using, and not just doing it because you feel like it or because you want to. Understand the reasoning. So if I were looking at your annual perfections with the solar return, I would be using a whole sign solar return. And I would be using the birth location in that case. But for my practice and for most of what I do, I'm looking at the modern lens. I'm looking at the solar return in the Placidus house system, and I'll cast it for your current location. So let me know your thoughts on this, guys. Let me know if it makes sense, how it feels, if you have experimented with using solar return charts cast in both the birth location and the current location, and if exploring more of these actual techniques and learning how to use them from some of the great esteemed astrologers of our time interests you, then please sign up for my webinar. It's going to be eye-opening. And I also, years ago, I co-authored a solar return astrology report through Astrograph software. This is the creator of Time Passages software and the famous Time Passages app. So this is many years that I've had this experience implementing and using the solar return chart. I'm going to link in the description box below the link where you can purchase that solar return astrology report if it interests you, because like I said, I have co-authored it with Henry Seltzer, who is the creator of Time Passages software, and that will help you get an idea of what's coming up in your solar return chart for the next year. But if you are a student of astrology and you want the more in-depth nooks and crannies and another tool in your astrological tool belt, sign up for my webinar. It is going to be so informative and so much fun, and I hope to see you there. Have a great day.